Well, thank you very much for your invitation. Thank you, Frank-Walter, for our discussions and for the opportunity we have yesterday to inaugurate this historical exhibition in Berlin. We are asked if we are facing an era of global disorder, and I think that to some extent the answer should be a resounding yes. Obviously, it is too early to understand the way President-elect elected Trump will shape the new US foreign policy. Of course, it will not be the same of President Obama, and of course, I think in our region, it will also not be similar to the massive military involvement of the George W. Bush administration. But my proposal is to all of us that instead of concentrating our energies to guess the future of US policies that we will very soon understand, Europe should concentrate in the effort of solving our own problems. Because EU is living through the most difficult phase in its history. The impression conveyed in these days is of a sort of perfect storm where terrorism, migration flows, rising populism, and the enduring effects of the economic recessions, especially on youth unemployment, are all there together. In our societies, we feel a huge public disenchantment, even anger in some way, vis-à-vis the European Union. And your survey showed that also in a rich and in relative good shape country as Germany is, the same attitude is there. It's not a majority attitude, but it is a serious attitude that we have to take very seriously. So confronted with such a complex scenario, we cannot be complacent. In the international environment, in order to defend the liberal order, we should acknowledge that globalization produces winners and losers. And we should work to reduce inequalities. The forgotten man, Frank Delano Roosevelt used to refer to, and Donald Trump frequently mentioned in his electoral campaign, do not live just in the US. We have in Europe many forgotten men feeling to be poorer because of globalization. And there are millions of forgotten young people uncertain of their future. So we have to take very seriously the increasing dissatisfaction of our public opinion and offer credible answers. Neither the rhetoric call on more Europe or the endless discussion on the EU institutional architecture will provide real answers. On the contrary, we must build a Europe that works on the most pressing issues for our citizens. Not a too little, too late Europe, but a union capable to manage rapidly and effectively the new challenges, providing and implementing viable solutions. We should work together to transform the Brexit event into a positive opportunity for Europe, or at least in a wake-up call for Europe. And we have already opened this kind of discussion among, for example, the 6 founding member states. We met several times, and in other meetings. And as Frank was saying, we will use also the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome next March exactly to discuss this perspective. But we already know that to make EU work better, we need to move with determination along 3 directions. One, first of all, is to give answers on security, migration, and economic growth. As for security, I think we all know that next year could be the year of the defeat of Daesh. It is not already there, but it could be possible next year. But terrorism will not disappear once Mosul and Raqqa will be liberated. And this is why we need the European approach, the approach of a comprehensive and multidimensional strategy, which should envisage not only a military, but also a political, economical, and cultural approach. The other challenge is migration. Europe made some progress on the subject, as in the case of the Balkan route and the EU-Turkey agreement. But let me be very clear on the point. The migration issue in Europe may seem under control today, but it is not. And not only for what President Erdogan is threatening about the EU-Turkey agreement. While the flows along the Balkan route have been dramatically reduced, those through the central Mediterranean are continuing and even growing in the last 2 or 3 months. So as a matter of fact, the challenge is far from being won. In the last years, Italy has been very often alone in the effort to save lives in the Mediterranean. Now it is more a European commitment and challenge. And after the proposal of a migration compact, largely welcomed by the EU, now it's time to achieve concrete results in the migration pacts the EU has proposed to 5 African countries. Especially Niger. We spoke about this yesterday with Frank Walter. That is a crucial transit country. 170,000 people crossed last year the border from Niger to Libya. And where local authorities are willing to cooperate. At the same time, we have to accelerate the agreements with the other countries and to work together to have progress on Libya. We can talk about this, if you like, in a few moments. And finally, on the economic European future, we believe that EU must do whatever it takes to deliver on its promise of prosperity and rebalancing inequalities. Growth in Europe is disappointing compared to many parts of the world, but compared to the US. So there is a lot to change in our economic policies. And this requires both to strengthen our tools for growth and to flexibly implement our common rules. The second direction to follow, I'll be very brief and close soon my remarks, in order to overcome the European crisis, is managing properly the consequences of Brexit. It is clear that there can be no negotiation before this notification has taken place. We repeat this in our conferences, but it is the case. We need clarity on the UK side in order to reduce political uncertainty and avoid the risk of a Brexit domino effect. And as for the new agreement that the EU will conclude with London as third country, our position is crystal clear. It should be based on a friendly attitude towards UK and on mutual rights and obligations. And it could not ignore the principle that access to the single market requires acceptance of all four freedoms. The third direction to take is about to start imagining a new model for EU. And this would be, I repeat, very interesting to discuss next March in Rome. Without stepping back from what we have achieved, we need an EU where different paths of integration can coexist successfully. We have to manage a differentiation that already exists. We are not inventing different levels of integration. They exist. From Schengen to the currency, and they are likely to increase in the future. In this respect, our work together with France and Germany for an effective relaunch of the European common defense could be a very interesting sector to practice the idea of different level of integration. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this scenario where crisis seems to be the new normal, stability and reforms in my own country are crucial. And this is the reason why the approval of our constitutional reforms through the referendum that, as you probably know, is fixed for next Sunday is so important. The approval of these reforms will stabilize our country and further accelerate the path of our reforms. And Italy is entering a crucial two-year period in foreign policy. Next year we will assume the rotating presidency of the G7. We will sit in the UN Security Council. We will host the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome. We will chair the so-called Berlin process in relation between Western Balkans and EU. And we are ready in 2018 to exercise the OSCE presidency that Germany is now having. What I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, dear Frank, is that in all these endeavors, our cooperation, the cooperation between Italy and Germany, will be crucial as it has been strong and crucial in the last years. Thank you.